500 years of football expertise and the future of the game. Powered by Sumer Sports, come together. Breaking down the big board with the guys that were in the room. Today's panel includes Sumer Sports Senior Offensive Line Evaluator, former NFL player, scout, and Director of Player Personnel for the 49ers, Joel Patten. Also joining us is Eric Stokes. Eric is the Senior Safety Evaluator for Sumer Sports, a former NFL player and scout, and the former Assistant GM for the Miami Dolphins. And we're bringing it all together with the most sophisticated sports technology ever engineered. This is The Evaluation. Wide receivers. The wideout position might be the flashiest in football, but behind every highlight is 100 missed routes, 1,000 reps, and one big question. Can this guy separate himself from a cornerback, from other wide receivers, and most importantly, from the noise? Scouts look for speed, hands, and attitude, but mostly they look for trust. Because if your quarterback doesn't believe you'll be there, you won't be. Welcome to The Evaluation. I'm your host, Ator Ewan, and today we're talking about the men who dazzle us with their hands and mesmerize us with their feet. That's right, we're talking wide receivers. Gentlemen, appreciate you being here. Joel, we're gonna start with you. What wide receiver from this year's class would you first like to highlight?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about Carnell Tate from Ohio State University. 6'3", which is ideal length for the position. He's 195 pounds, really smooth, fluid athlete when he's leaving the line of scrimmage. Has a great feel for setting up leverage and separating out of coverage, both in zone and man-to-man. I think they do a good job teaching it there, but I think he's very natural at doing it as well. His midfield speed and acceleration is really good, but I think his vertical top end is even better. And I think that's why you've seen him make a lot of catches down the field. He tracks it easily down the field. Good catch radius. He can adjust outside his body to throws that are low, high. Runs hard in rack. If he could do one thing better for me, it would be more elusive, more dynamic in rack. And I think he's a kid that we'll talk about. His vertical speed is probably better top end than what his 40 time may be when he comes off the line of scrimmage. And that'll be a debate for some rooms. But I really like this kid. I think he's going to be a productive impact starter. He's got versatility to play any spot for you. And I think he'll be a really good first-year player, just like the guys that went out of Ohio State before him.
Is there any concern that he was never really wide receiver one at Ohio State?
Not when you consider the guys he was playing behind.
Right.
You know, and we'll talk about this as well, but, you know, even this year where their offensive line went through so many changes, just getting the ball out consistently and finding all the receivers that they have. But, I mean, we talk about Egbuka and you talk about Olave and Smith and Jigba. You have to wait your time there at Ohio State, and I think he did.
Absolutely. Eric, who's your first player?
Yeah, Makai from USC, 5'11", 195, and I love this guy. Really good route runner, has the ability to control the middle of the field. You see the stem and setup in his games. He had a really good feel for understanding how to leverage out defenders, and you see that separation quickness. He can drop his weight, like the instincts. Very good feel for being able to find, sit, and settle in the soft zones. He understands how to post off defenders and uncover. The other thing that I love about him is that outstanding hands. You see this guy make adjustments. He's got really good balance, body control. He can finish in contested situations, and so those are elements that you love. This guy turns into a running back with the ball in his hands. He's a playmaker. Once he gets it, he's got shake, he has make-miss. You see he's a natural daylight runner. He just brings playmaking ability to the table once he touches it. The other thing he brings is he's a very good kickoff and punt returner, so you're also getting that aspect in his game. You know, I would say probably the couple of things that you wish that he had. He's 5'11", so he's a little compact. The catch radius maybe is a little tighter in the congested areas. And then he's not explosive. He's got more initial juice in his game than maybe the long speed and explosive speed that you want to see in the open field. But this guy's going to make his home as an F receiver in this league. He'll come right in. You're getting a really good slot with dual kickoff and punt return ability, and you're going to love having this guy.
And I'm sure it doesn't hurt that he also won the Blinicoff for being the best wide receiver in the country either.
No question. And, you know, there's other tidbits about this guy because this speaks to his football makeup, but he actually played DB as a freshman and then was a two-way player, playing both corner and receiver, and then obviously we see what he's done once he's settled in. But I think it speaks to what kind of football player he is. offense.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eric. Now it's time to talk to our Sumer Sports data analyst and football integration lead, Sam Brackhouse, for our very first deep dive. Sam?
Thanks, Ator. When it comes to wide receivers, this is one of the positions that when we measure it, it typically ends up happening. This is what we call one of the stickiest positions, meaning that statistics actually give us a great idea of how good these players are. So let's break down these two players, different flavors here. Carnell Tate, Joel mentioned it, vertical threat. He is a 10 in our analytics on those go balls at beating the guy down the field, making really big plays. A couple causes for concern after the catch. We have not seen the production. Now, that does not mean college production equals pro production. He certainly may have in his bag, given that our estimates from our machine learning team have him at about a 4.5, 4.4 guy. So he definitely has that top end speed, and we see it on those deep vertical routes. The question remains, can he be a full field wide receiver like Makai Lemon? Makai Lemon, great hands. That is his blue chip trait. He is an 8 or 9 guy when it comes to securing the football. And he's more of a well-rounded guy than Carnell Tate, but he doesn't necessarily have that perfect trait that Carnell Tate has. You're gonna get vision from this guy after the catch. You're gonna get releases from this guy in press coverage. And you're going to get great separation, as Eric said, from that F position, from that slot position. That is what the analytics say. He doesn't have the bottom end necessarily that Carnell Tate has, but he also doesn't have the top end. So if you want a more full-bodied wide receiver, you might want Makai Lemon at the top of the draft, but if you want that game-breaking effort and trait, you go with Carnell Tate.
Thank you, Sam. Joel, who do you have next?
I have Jordyn Tyson, another really good-looking kid out of Arizona State. 6'2", but 200 pounds, so he adds a little bit more thickness in his body type. And this kid is really legitimate in his burst and acceleration off the line of scrimmage, again for 200 pounds. Really smooth also in and out of his routes. Does a good job as well leveraging, using his body, and catches the ball really easily, especially on the run and on the crossers. And is good with the ball in his hands afterwards. Like I said, with the speed and quickness that he has, this guy is actually pretty good and pretty proficient at blocking, which will help him at the next level as well. As I mentioned, the one thing I'd like to see more of is him using that speed and quickness in his rack and to run away from tackles. Really good in the red zone, attacking the ball 50-50, but making more vertical catches and making himself more available on vertical routes and adjusting to it. But he's another kid with a skill set that I think is going to translate easily to the NFL. Another versatile receiver that's smart. He'll have a really, really productive first year, and I think sky's the limit for him. I think he's got a lot of good football left in him.
Any concerns with the injury history?
That's a big concern, actually. One of the things that you'll hear coach speak is your greatest ability has to be availability, or durability, if you want to call it that. He's had a number of injuries almost every year he's played. He's come back from them and played at a high level once he has. But yeah, obviously that'll be something that they'll look into at the combine on his medical record. And I don't think it'll affect his value, but it might.
Eric, who's your next player eval?
Yes, Elijah Sarratt from the University of Indiana, 6'2" and 213, true senior, 4-year starter. Now, he's got an interesting road because he's attended different schools as a multiple transfer. So that's a little bit more unique from that standpoint. But this is a big-bodied receiver, big physical. Think of him almost like a power forward. He really embraces that aspect of the game, really strong off the line of scrimmage. He really does a nice job of playing strong through contact at the top of the route, understands how to use his body to hold off defenders at the catch point. Really like just his overall competitive nature and effort that he brings. He's got a really great rapport working with Fernando Mendoza when it comes to those back shoulder fades and slot fades that you'll see, and in the red zone situations. Really good timing, really good ball skills, the high point, and you see the balance and body control in those situations. The other thing about this guy is he's an outstanding blocker. Tough, physical, will embrace that aspect of the game. A couple of flaws, he's missing a level of burst and initial separation quickness versus tight man, so he's not an instant separator, and then he's not going to take the top off in terms of vertical speed. His game is going to be controlling the sticks, and he's really a hard hat workman type receiver that you're going to bring into the fold, but loves this guy, see him really as a power F or potential Z type receiver, and then I think he's going to bring special teams ability because he's a big body and he's tough and physical, and those things are very underrated and really coveted at our level, where you can do.
And there's been a lot of talk about the rise of Indiana football, and I'm not sure they get there without Sarratt.
No question. I mean, they have a really good yin and yang with those two receivers. He's the dirty work guy, and then they have an over-the-top guy. So they have a really good balance with that offensive system that they're working with. So, yeah, some nice targets from Mendoza this year.
Thank you, Eric. Sam, what you got for us?
Again, different flavors here. Jordyn Tyson, the primo prospect over multiple years. We've seen him have an impact 8-level ability to separate. And that is something that puts him at that 1B right under Makai, Lemon, and Carnell Tate. So the questions become with him is, as Joel mentioned, contested catch. Would like to see him use his kind of more prototypical wide receiver body, 6'1", 6'2", 190. Would like to see him use that in contested catch situations so that he can go to the next level and be a wide receiver 1. Also, we have questions given about how much he was used. He was the primary point of that offense in both 24 and 25. We just haven't seen the blocking production that one would see, particularly in those Shanahan offenses where Puka Nacua and some of those other guys are blocking. I think that's a little bit of a question with him analytically. We don't see those impact blocks, but he does do a good job. You look at Sarratt, this is a different guy. Came onto the scene this year on an Indiana football team that was absolutely incredible and dynamic. The question becomes, he is a power forward body guy. We are not necessarily obsessed with his speed at the wide receiver position. Our machine learning experts have him at about a 4.6. And as a result, we have real questions about his ability to separate. But the real question becomes at the wide receiver position, can you get me the ball in those catch situations? He's a true 7, a quality player there. And I think as a result, that fit that Eric highlighted is perfect for him. He's gonna be a guy who can really dominate in the middle of the field and in the intermediate zones. That's why I think he's a guy who could go round 2. I think that's what his analytical trait projection builds up to be.
Thank you, Sam. Joe, you got one more player for us.
Yeah, Chris Bell, and sounds a little bit similar to what we just talked about. This guy's a thick body, 6'2", 220 pounds. Looks like he's stuffed with rocks, man. He's put together nicely. Really strong off the line of scrimmage. Very efficient, very disciplined route runner. Strong more than speed and separation, but another guy that catches the ball really well. He does a good job of box out rebound, understands leverage and how to stay in front of coverage. And he's a load in rack, just like we just mentioned about Sarratt. This guy's like a running back once he gets the ball in his hands. Another guy that really embraces the role of blocking. This is something that he enjoys doing, and I think he's good at it. Limitations are going to be maybe his versatility in terms of running all the route trees that you would at all the positions. He may be a little bit more limited that way. And he's not going to be a burst separation or a vertical take the top off again. But I think what elevates his value is the fact that this guy can play on all 3 downs on offense, but also be a core special teams guy and just really be that steady Eddie package piece that a lot of these offenses rely on.
And that willingness to block, how important is that moving from college to the next level?
Well, we talk about the blocking for any good player, but I mean, if you're going to play and if you're not that elite number 1 and number 2 receiver, you better do it all pretty well, and that includes special teams, and that's why I think he embodies all of that.
Eric, who's your final player eval?
Yes, Denzel, Boston, University of Washington, 6'4", 209. And the thing about this guy is when you see those type of dimensions, you want to see a big man that plays like a big man, and he does exactly that. The one thing that's really unique about him is he has outstanding ball skills. This guy has the ability to high pointer, he can track, he plays above the rim. You're going to see those Moss moments and down the field and in red zone situations where he can literally puck the ball off the defender's head. And then that's just a very unique trait he had. He had only 5 drops in 2 years despite over 200 targets. So that speaks to his quality of how he can play the ball, make plays on the ball at the moment of truth. Really love the instincts. I mean, he's got a great feel for settling the zones and understanding how to create separation. The other thing about this guy, even though he's a tall, long guy, he's got really good balance and body control. He can drop his weight. He does a nice job of maintaining his speed in and out of break points, working underneath. And then as a long strider, he's deceptive to get vertical. This guy has the ability to build to his tempo. You know, he's that 6'4" frame who can cover and eat up ground, so he's sneaky to get on top of defenders. And then you see the ball tracking skills down the field and the playmaking ability in that area. I would say probably, you know, if I had couple negatives on him, well, he'll need to get stronger just seeing the press coverage as he moves to the next level just with that frame. The thing about this guy, he brings positional flexibility. I mean, you see it on the tape. He's coming from a pro-style system with Jed Fish out there at University of Washington, so he can play, you know, Z, X, F. You see it all in that area, and I think he's going to translate very well to the league.
And that versatility is something that you really covet on the next level as well.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, in this day and age, receivers have to have a level of flexibility, and certainly this guy has that, and you see the intelligence, you see the instincts in his game, and like I said, he should adapt really well to the NFL level.
Thank you, Eric. Sam, I hope your oxygen tank is full because we need one more deep dive.
I'm full. I love these wide receivers, and I love in particular these two guys because I think these are two players that you will want to keep an eye on as the draft season moves on. Because right now, not exactly the household names that the Tysons, the Lemons are, but these are guys who I think front offices are going to fall in love with. Let's start with Bell. Big guy with a big presence. We don't see him have any majorly sub-average traits in the analytics. This is a guy who can kind of do it all. That being said, not necessarily a certified blue chip 10 or 9 trait. So if there's a team out there who really wants a versatile and well-built wide receiver, he could definitely be a good move for a team. Let's move on to Boston. This is a guy who has one of those 9 traits, and it's route running. And when the eye meets the AI when it comes to route running, that allows for that versatility that Eric was talking about. That's his absolute key point. A couple things that I would like to see a little bit better. As Eric said, doesn't necessarily have the makeup to be a guy who can shred through tackles. I want to see more after the catch production, and also his contested catch ability, or at least the production that he showed, did drop slightly a little bit this year. As it continues to get harder, I don't want to see him shy away from those. The numbers said that he had slightly fewer contested catches in 2025 than he had prior. If that continues a trend, I think that could scare off some scouts, but we've seen the big plays from him. We see the great route running from him. When you can get a versatile wide receiver in a good offense, it's a game changer, and I think both of those guys could potentially be that.
Appreciate you, Sam. So there's a ton of talent still left on this board, so let's go to Sumer Sports senior analyst Sean Syed for some rapid-fire evaluations.
It's lightning round time. Concepcion is a vertical threat that has consistent energy and a competitive attitude. His high-end speed helps him separate, and he can create yards after the catch. Zachariah Branch is a good athlete that has solid quickness, agility, and speed. He can win in space, and his punt return ability is a plus. Germie Bernard is a crisp route runner with separation ability. He is quick off the line and is able to use his length to make plays. Brazzell is a fluid athlete that has the instincts to recognize openings in zone coverage. His dependable hands help him finish plays. Jacoby Lane has natural ball skills and can track and adjust to throws at a high level. His play strength also shows up when he's blocking. Omar Cooper Jr. has a solid frame and can win with length down the field. He can win in multiple ways and shows efficient footwork and balance in his route running.
Earlier, I sat down with Sumer Sports CEO Larissa Horton. Here's our next segment, the SAI Check, powered by Sumer Sports. So as a football fan, when I'm watching the broadcast, the one thing I don't love is so often I can't see the receiver running the route the entire time. Is there a way that Sumer Tech can break down route running?
Well, Sumer looks at everything a wide receiver does. In this particular case, running a route is so critical for the outcome of the play. With CeeDee Lamb, I think this play in particular, we looked at what's the likeliness of a pass and how far is it going to go and how's the completion. And just his running changed the prediction of how far is it going to go.
How does his running change the prediction?
His route running ability showed how fast he could be, and hence the coverage that he was actually going to be able to get away from and the separation that he creates.
And is that also measured against the corner or the defender as well? Do you take in their abilities into his route running?
We are not just measuring the defender that's on him, but who can actually recover and help out. In this particular case, he ended up with 2 defenders and had a contested catch. So we are watching every step of the way and what's the likeliness for him to beat the defense that is actually now there, and not just beat it, but actually get his hands on the ball and do something with it afterwards.
Right, because it's not just the corner, but it's also the safety as well. It's positioning with the linebackers, the depth. There's so much involved in that play.
Yeah, so we're looking at what's the likeliness of him beating his coverage, catching the ball, a contested catch, which he did a great job of, and then he actually took it and ran after the fact. And so each of these have different likelinesses of happening when we look at how other players have performed the same task.
You guys are really changing sports with science.
Well, we're measuring and we're gonna help people out to help them understand which particular skill was actually the key skill that made the difference. In this case, it was actually the route running.
Some people live this game day in and day out. Let's bring in someone who has indeed walked a mile in these shoes.
I'm privileged. I'm pretty happy today. I used to work with this guy, Steve Smith Sr.
Appreciate it, sir.
I went back, I was looking at some of your evaluations that you've done the last couple of years. And I put the Carolina tape on, but I'm going, who the hell's 18? And
Jalen Coker.
He's in there digging out C-gap, blocking linebackers. He's making body, catches down the field with a big, strong hands and body. I'm like, who is this guy? And then I looked up some of your stuff, and you were all over Jalen Coker before the draft. Somebody out of Holy Cross, man. You dug him up. I thought that was awesome.
Well, I appreciate it. You know, a film I watched that really told me, because, he's playing at Holy Cross, so he's playing Dartmouth, he's playing Yale, he's playing some of the Ivy League schools. I know scouts are going to devalue small school guys.
Right.
But I want a small school guy to dominate in the Ivy League like Jalen Coker did, but I also want to see what happens if he plays a bigger school, a school that, Boston College only produced, a handful of guys. Luke Kuechly, Matty Ice, Matt Ryan, Zay Flowers, all these guys. And he was routing them up. And the route that really showed me something is because I'm a former wide receiver. It was press coverage, his release, his finish, and how he attacked the football on a curl route.
Yeah.
I said, oh, goodness gracious, this kid can play. Just got to see how fast he runs.
Dude, you're awesome. I want to take you back to high school for a minute. Work me through the process, how you ended up at Santa Monica College.
I had struggled with school for a very long time. My mind moves faster than my mouth. And so when I was a really young kid, I stuttered. So I had a speech impediment.
Wow.
And I was diagnosed dyslexic, so I was in slower classes. But the problem with the slower classes, I was getting my work done, and then I started to become a troublemaker. So I spent a lot of hours in detention. And so I kind of took that from middle school into my freshman and sophomore year in high school, where sports was sports, but schoolwork was like, man, I'm not doing this. What happened was my 10th grade year, I had to take pictures for the yearbook with the freshmen. And that in itself was embarrassing.
Yeah.
So I spent my whole junior year catching up so I can graduate with my graduating class. And so that's how I ended up at Santa Monica. It was a journey. And that kind of created a little bit of me being a hothead, because I struggled, and then I started to become obsessed with the people who rejected me. I tried to make sure everyone knew that if you didn't pick me, if I was not chosen to play wide receiver or DB, man, bump you. You're against me. And so that became a problem, so that's how I got to Santa Monica, long and short.
It sounds like you make the statement that became a problem, but it also sounds like it became something that drove you towards becoming who you are.
Absolutely. And so some people will say that's a chip, right? I kind of disagree because chips sometimes can be manifested or imagined that are there.
Yeah.
It wasn't imagined. I went to the University of Utah at the time in 2000, small school. However, it was me and another returner who led the nation in punt return.
Yeah.
I had about 3 returns called back. They actually invented the halo rule because of me in college. Guys used to take me out so I wouldn't return it. Utah was just not respected as a big-time school. And so I just never was given the opportunities. It was always based off someone being hurt. Great example. I was invited to the East-West Shrine game, so that was super dope. But I was brought in about 3 days after they had started because a receiver named Quincy Morgan, who draft stock had already risen, and he was like, man, I don't need to go there. So he bailed.
Yep. And
I ended up MVP. This is not a made-up chip on the shoulder. I was invited because someone else didn't show up.
I never saw a guy play more angry than you. And I didn't know if that went back and you played that angry in high school. I didn't know if you played that angry in college. And it's really kind of cool to hear you talk about what is a chip and what isn't a chip and what drove you.
In high school, I played more aggressive. But when I got to college and then the pros, man, I ripped the Band-Aid off and I just played angry because part of it has to do with my mental makeup. You know, being a third-round pick out of Utah, primarily being seen as a returner.
Right.
I made the Pro Bowl that year, but I was also on the 1-15 team, and I couldn't get a sniff of offensive plays.
Right.
Make that math make sense to me. We 1-15, we're lacking explosive plays,
Right.
and you got a third-round draft pick who's leading the league in kickoff returns because our defense is, you know, struggling because of our offense is not going great. And I remember we were playing the St. Louis Rams. I had 244 kickoff yards and a touchdown, and that was only points we scored.
My GM brain's going now like, you're 1-15. You got a kid that's putting the ball in the end zone left and right on the kicks. He was a college wideout. Why are you not finding a way to get him touches in your offense?
I couldn't play wide receiver, but we weren't winning. And then I started my last game against the New England Patriots, who eventually went on to win the Super Bowl, but I wasn't even allowed to run out as a starter.
Yeah.
Patrick Jeffries was. And so for people that are watching right now, they say, what's the big deal? Well, it's a huge deal for a kid from L.A. or whatever city you're from.
Yep.
You're in the National Football League. You want to be a starter. You're about to start the game. And, oh, by the way, George Seifert taps me on the shoulder, says, hey, Patrick Jeffries running out, but you're starting.
Cool.
That did not register of how the fandango was that possible, that I'm starting, however, he gets to run out on the tunnel, because every kid knows, man, to run out of the tunnel to high-five your teammates, and to hear the crowd roar, even if it's a little, it's enough that you say, I've made it.
Yep.
And I was not afforded that opportunity. You talking about pissed off.
That was driving you.
Oh, I was pissed off with a purpose now.
So your 05 season, man, Triple Crown.
Yes, sir.
Was that the year coming off an injury?
Yeah, that was the year I came off injury. I got hurt opening night against the Green Bay Packers. Former teammate of mine, we joke about it now, Hannibal Navies, horse collar tackled me and broke my ankle, tore the ligaments in the inside and outside, and it was devastating. It was a very painful injury for me. Coming off my first 1,000-yard season, going to the Super Bowl, unfortunately losing to the New England Patriots. And that was my third year. So I'm coming into my fourth year, my contract's up. And there was a lot of questions on what kind of player is Steve going to be? I already had my trainer that I worked with, and we were balls to the wall. We did a lot of things that were to maintain my strength, to maintain my lower body, to make sure that I can run after the catch so I could fight through. And I wore a heart rate monitor. And those numbers would go to my trainer, and my offseason will be built on my heart rate. So at the peak of a play, if I caught a pass, I got going, my heart rate was up to 225 beats per minute. So we had data to kind of figure out, for me, what worked and what I need to do. So I had a plan.
So you were way ahead of the time.
Yes, sir.
Regarding data, conditioning. You were 15 years ahead of the whole league.
Yeah.
To play 16 years in the NFL, which I consider mind-boggling, that very, very few, the elite of the elite, get to play that long in the NFL.
Facts.
You've already talked about conditioning, but what made you trust yourself about everything you decided to do on the field?
I got to sit back for this one, because now we talking football, right? For me, my instincts always was built on my routine during the week, which was film.
Yep.
I never allowed my personal thoughts to interfere, because I had this training with the sports psychologist, which is when I watch film, I'm watching without any emotion. It's data. So I'm not looking at it where, oh man, I love this kid, or oh, I don't like this kid. I don't know him. All I know is he is in my way. That's it. And how do I get around him?
Yep.
Past him, and sometimes through him.
After your career ended, this unbelievable career, I read something where I think it was on NFL.com in 2018. You wrote an article about some of the demons you fought and that you finally started to recognize. You talked about depression, and you said, I routinely felt trapped, inferior, and alone. And that hit me.
Sharing it for me, it's evolved. So 2018, I'm retired, but in COVID, 2 years later, now my foundation, we own a facility, a 24-hour behavioral health urgent care, the first one in Mecklenburg County in Charlotte, North Carolina.
I appreciate you giving us this amount of time and opening up and talking a little bit, because the more I hear, the more I appreciate where you came from and who you are. And I just want to thank you.
Oh, appreciate it, man. I've admired and I loved working with you. You got to come on my pod pretty soon.
I will. I'd be happy to.
Appreciate it, sir.
Say, brother.
One of the most popular metrics when evaluating a wide receiver is speed. But what does that actually mean on the field? This is strange, but true.
It's the most popular event at the Combine, but is the 40-yard dash meaningful for wide receiver evaluation? We all know speed matters for the position, for separation, for breakaway. But is the 40-yard dash a helpful way to measure this? In order to find this answer, we took every wide receiver to run a 40 at the Combine for a period of 17 years and compared their 40 times to their draft slot and receiving production in their first 3 years. If the 40 is predictive, there should be a strong correlation between 40 time and receiving yard production. 1 would mean there's a 1-to-1 correlation, strong. Fast 40 definitively means good NFL receiver. 0 means the two are completely unrelated. The correlation here was 0.21, minimal. And it's been pretty consistently minimal over the years. And for a while, teams were drafting receivers accordingly. The correlation between 40 time and draft position, very low, then just about right, then all of a sudden, it almost doubled. But why? One theory, Tyreek Hill. Smaller guy, insanely fast, very good, came out right before the surge. Did he change the way teams viewed wide receiver ones? Were people looking for the next Hill? Did that translate to them looking for more speed? But more importantly, is this a smart approach? To answer that, let's separate wide receivers into speed groups. The fastest guys, the fast enough guys, and the guys who are slower. And this is where we found something very interesting. Of all 3 groups, the one with the lowest correlation to NFL receiving production was the fastest group. And it's not just low, it's negative, which means as the 40 time got better, the yardage output got worse. Lesson here, fast is good. Fastest, unnecessary, maybe even a little misleading. In other words, Tyreek is more than speed.
Lindsay Rhodes of Sumer Sports, welcome to the round table.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Good to have you. So we're going to talk a lot about slot receivers, and look, we'd all love to have a Calvin Johnson, but in this day and age of football, do you value a guy like a Makai Lemon as opposed to a big body wide receiver with the changing landscape of the game?
The slot conversation. I've been somewhat obsessed with the power slot in the last couple of years. From a draft standpoint, Emeka was my favorite guy in last year's draft just because of the versatility, and you can kind of see him in a lot of different places. And I think you mentioned the Rams. The Lions are another offense where, like, I think Amon or St. Brown helped sort of shift what we see as a wide receiver one as a possibility. For a long time, it was the big-bodied guy on the outside, and you have to look a certain way and have a certain amount of speed. Now it feels like it's kind of opened up to a lot of different body types, and you can build it inside out from a passing game standpoint. And I'm wondering how that's changed evaluation.
Well, for me, it's a huge change because you used to stereotype what a slot receiver was. He's your little short, shifty, compact, guy that's going to need a little bit more space to get off the line of scrimmage. So you want to put him in that position. Maybe you're going to use him in motion out of the slot. But then I remembered over the course of scouting, Julio Jones moved to the slot, who was big, was fast, could run routes, could leverage everybody. Why'd they do that? So that they couldn't zone bracket coverage him, just to get him open off the line of scrimmage. And then if we moved him in motion, who's going to go with him? Does that change the defense? So I think the slot receiver has evolved into what you expect the defense to do and what you hope the pressure is that you place on them with whomever you place in there.
Is a type of wide receiver easier to hit on?
I tend to keep it pretty simple. Number one rule the receivers have to do, catch the ball. So no matter what, as a receiver, number one, you have to catch the ball. Usually the smart guys tend to do really well in our league because they can play multiple positions and they do understand concepts. And then the last thing is really underrated, but toughness. Toughness at the receiver position is a game changer. When your receivers are some of your toughest players, and you know some of the good teams that I've been on, it changes the whole dynamic. And you see that with San Fran, how they stress that they want their receivers they have to block or they're not going to get the rock, so to speak. And you see that in the Sean McVay systems where it's absolutely demanded of them. And so those are really kind of the components that that I think about when you're evaluating receivers.
Let's talk a bit about speed. I think of a Chris Carter who is not running a 4.3, but one of the best to ever do it. How much do you ding a guy who is not going to run that great 40 time, but is a guy that you're going to expect to be productive on your team?
I saw this the other day and it blew my mind. Jerry Rice ran a 4.71 coming out of college. 4.71. He never played 4.71 in the National Football League. So what I learned early on was what play speed is and what time speed is. And we talked about Carnell Tate, and your point about when you see a time on a card, there's a lot of buildings that get nervous because their wideout coach or their offensive coordinator is like, well, wait a second, we need to take the top off. And he ran 4.7. Well, he's a tall receiver. He really accelerates like Tate down the field. So the time speed versus the play speed has to be made up by your eyes and by your conviction in how that player plays with his pads on and what we call game speed. Some kids just play really fast on game day.
Well, and
really
some people
fast.
that run really fast in a track and field event don't play fast with a helmet and pads on, right? Like it's a totally different thing that you're measuring. So I think that the combine it's great for a lot of different things, and the 40 is something that we all love.
Yep.
But I think that this is where one of the advancements in technology is really helpful, and that you can see that somebody's fast on the field, but now we can actually literally track it. We have tracking data that tells you how fast they play and can translate that to essentially a 40 time, like a predicted 40 time. And we've got tons of evidence of guys who ran slower than they actually played. Puka Nacua is a good example of this. He ran, I think, somewhere in the 4.5s, but plays in the 4.4s. And there are lots of examples of that. And I think we've seen evidence that some teams, just based on some draft correlations, we've seen evidence that teams are maybe shifting a little bit more to looking at that, and maybe even getting to a point where they're maybe even overweighting that particular speed in a way that they used to overweight the 40 time at the combine.
There's a lot of fast players that when they get to the line of scrimmage, that if they have to think as they're releasing, as they're headed down the field, whether it's a veteran like Moore or a young player, I've heard this said by wide receiver coaches quite often. This is a 4.3 kid that plays about 4.6 if he doesn't know what he's doing.
Right.
And that's something that you take for granted sometimes because you look at that time speed and think, man, we got to have that. What if you're not a great ball skills or you don't track it well? And we talk about concentration. Kids that have zero drops and the one kid that just can't track it, he's a 4.3 guy, but you can't rely on him down the field. That's where speed has to be taken into consideration, but not the ultimate deciding factor in some cases.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask about contested catches, because that's something that came up a lot in the evaluation of the individual players. If you see a player in college that has a lot of contested catches, is that both a good sign and a bad sign at the same time? Because why are you in so many contested catch situations? That's something that I have wondered about a few receivers that I won't name that have come out in the last couple of years that have been maybe some red flags for me. And I'm wondering if it should be.
You're definitely concerned about that because our league, if they're contested in college, actually they may not even be open at the NFL level.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think like you watch Devontae Adams, dependability sometimes are contested catches that we're counting on you making. You may be past your elite days as an athlete, but I think that dependability is a factor that goes underrated sometimes. And you look at the catch that he made in the game the other day, and not only was it contested, but the way he had to change his body was pretty impressive. So I think that kind of goes both ways.
And also, if we hit you in the red zone all the time,
Yeah, all the time.
chances are much better. Those
Jump
are going to
ball
be
guy.
contested.
Absolutely. You two gentlemen have had the pleasure and honor, I'm sure, of scouting some of the greatest to ever do it at the wide receiver position. Do you have any personal stories of getting in early on some of future greats starting off at the college level?
Well, I'm not going to say he's a future great or Hall of Famer, but I am super proud to be a part of an organization where we didn't even draft. We found Doug Baldwin as a free agent with the Seattle Seahawks, and he had an incredible 10-year career. And really, he was a pillar of that offense. When you talk about who brought the toughness, who brought the physicality, it was quote unquote angry Doug. And so to find a guy that comes out of Stanford, who goes undrafted, and then ends up being a major contributor, and really, like I said, was one of the pillars of the offense in that time in Seattle. I'm really proud to be able to play a part, to be able to discover talent like that.
You guys just set up shop at Stanford back in the day, huh?
I did. As a
and-
West Coast scout, yes. I did spend a lot of time at Stanford.
I was with the 49ers at the time, and we did not, because both of them went to Seattle and had a good time taking it to us in the games that followed, so I can relate.
Joel, any stories?
Yeah, actually, I talk a lot about, when you take a player high in the draft, that's usually an organizational decision. That's owners, that's head coaches, that's GMs, there's a lot of people, offensive coordinators. But I'm reminded back in the day when I saw a good talent. I wasn't alone in my thinking, but I was scouting Andre Johnson at Miami, and was just so enamored with him as a player and as a person. And at the Texans that time, we had taken David Carr the year before, and we took him as the first player in the draft. And there was a little bit of a concern that, another high-profile offensive player, and we had a very productive year. And they talk a lot in your building about, not making it personal and kind of staying within your lane as an area scout. But I felt like our staff was directing us towards a defensive lineman. And I was compelled
Not
to
an
say,
offensive lineman? Are
not
you
an
sure?
offensive lineman.
David
Well,
Carr?
they didn't value this. Yeah, you're right. We needed that. He needed that. But I went kind of beyond what you normally do. I kind of fought hard for Andre because he was a really quiet young man. And so they were worried at the time was that intelligence level was, and he was an underclassman coming out. But when we got to the pro day and we saw the notes that he took, the intelligence he had on the board. But the thing that stood out about him was the wiring. He ran a 4.39 at 6'3", 230 pounds. And I was totally impressed by that, but it was on the second try because he wanted to improve his first time. He vertical jumped 39 and then vertical jumped 41 on his second. So just the integrity, the wiring, the kid that he was so impressive. And I wouldn't say I got him drafted, but I came close to not wanting to get fired because I wanted us to draft him badly.
Bang that table.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting to me about these two is that neither of them played wide receiver. And you obviously saw a lot of wide receivers in your career and knew a lot about them. And I'm wondering what you've learned about wide receivers since you started scouting them, about what makes one work versus what doesn't work.
Well, I think Eric hit the nail on the head. As an offensive lineman, I love playmakers. I love guys that can take the ball and hit a home run with it once they catch it, or they're going to move the chains for us if they got big play capability all the time. And they come, as we've talked about, in different shapes and sizes. So, yeah, if they're catching the ball down the field and they're dependable and they're reliable and they're mentally tough, which is a great point that you made. Yeah, I've learned a lot about, used to be I just appreciate them when they made big plays. But being able to evaluate what makes them make big plays or what makes them who they are has been fun as a scout, yeah.
Yeah, and I was always curious. So for me, I'd ask him. I'd say, hey, Bobby Ingram, tell me about the receiver position, because he was an excellent slot receiver. And he was a little bit more undersized. He's probably 5'10", 185 pounds, and so he had to do it different. So what are those attributes? What are those traits that you have that allow you to be successful, and what should I be looking for when I'm coming across players that are comparable in size? And so, like anything, if you want to know some of the answers to the ask the players that do it at a high level, and you're always able to gain really good insight into that.
That's essentially what I'm doing here today. Right?
Absolutely.
Teach me everything.
Lindsay, let's talk about slot receivers.
Well, we've talked a lot about them already, right? Some of the guys that are the biggest names at the wide receiver position today play a lot in the slot. That feels like a new development, as we've addressed. What do these guys do? Let's get more into that with today's scheme shift.
When you think of the greats at the wide receiver position, you might think of Randy Moss, Calvin Johnson, or Jerry Rice. Dominant receivers who won one-on-one on the outside. But today, stars like Puka Nacua, Amon St. Brown, and CeeDee Lamb are doing their damage somewhere else, in the slot. The slot is the area between the outside receiver and the offensive line. With teams spending most of their time in 11 personnel, with one running back, one tight end, and 3 wide receivers on the field, the slot receiver has become a key part of a healthy offense. What once was looked at as a speed position is now a cheat code. Offenses can avoid dominant outside cornerbacks by moving receivers inside. When teams motion a receiver into the slot or create a stack, they can avoid press coverage at the line and attack the soft parts of the defense over the middle of the field. Running start motions and unique formations mess with the defense's rules before the snap even happens. Can't beat man coverage? Get in a bunch. Better working in space? Find your way in the slot and get going across the field. Not everyone needs to be Randy or Calvin or Jerry anymore. The next great receiver might just be a 5th round pick from BYU who blocks like a tight end and spends a bunch of time, you guessed it, in the slot.
A big thank you to the team at Sumer Sports. And remember, draft night is loud, but evaluations are quiet. And we live in the quiet. Until next time.